Well, it looks like we might be live, Allison, based on the little red live blob in the top left-hand corner.
Awesome. Hello, everyone.
So lovely to see you. I'm really excited to be speaking with you today about social media for guides. Just a quick hello to everybody who's watching. I'm Heather Thorkelson. I'm a polar guide. I'm on the board of directors of the PTGA, and I also have a company called Twin Tracks Expeditions. So I have never actually worked directly with you, Allison, but we've been in contact over the years, and I've been following you on social media because I really love social media as a tool to connect with people, with other guides, with passengers that we've been out with, that kind of thing. And I've been impressed with how you show up on social media for many years now. So when we decided to do this next Guides Inside series, I was like, we got to get Allison on, because I think you're fairly well known for science, but perhaps some of the people watching don't know that you're also this amazing social media maven. So hopefully everybody watching has had a quick look at Allisons Bio that was posted on the Polar Tourism Guides page and in the Polar Guides group. But maybe you can give us just a quick introduction to yourself, how you started in the polar industry, and what you've been doing these past couple of years, and then we'll dive into the social media stuff.
Okay, sounds good. Nice to see you here, Heather, and hello to everybody that's watching live or watching later. And of course, thanks to Lauren in the background and PTGA. I actually got started in 2013, came down to the Ross Sea, Antarctica on a research vessel. And then years later, in 2016-17, eventually went back for graduate school to focus on polar research, and created a citizen science project, thinking that would be an amazing way to engage the tour community in the research that was going down in Antarctica. And so through that, I ended up going to one of the polar field staff conferences, and I was like, oh my gosh, this group of people is amazing. And then 2017, got a chance to go down on one of the tour ships, and then ever since then, except for this year, I've been able to go down and become a polar guide, and it's been awesome. And I'm really sorry, but my dog doesn't know when to come or go, so I have to go let her out of my bedroom right now. I'm sorry.
I've been having the same issues with my dog. We have a little 8-month-old puppy, and she is often scratching around in the background or jumping on me or doing something relatively inappropriate for a Zoom call, although she's not with me right now. So
yeah. Well, and of course, yeah, I have to keep my door shut so my housemates don't hear me. But anyways, okay, I'm back. So
great, good. So yeah, Allison, as I said, I've been following you for quite some time on social media. I think I initially started following you because someone said, oh, you should know Allison. And we had both started working for the same company, but our contracts weren't overlapping. And so I saw your Instagram profile at Woman Scientist, and I thought, she sounds cool. And immediately started like paying attention to what you were doing with stories and stuff. And I really enjoyed the content that you were putting out there. So I'd really love to hear what was it that prompted you to start using social media, and also with so many options to choose from, right? There's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all kinds of other ones that I have never even looked at before, like TikTok and whatnot. Once you started using it at that time, like how did you decide where you wanted to hang out, which platform you wanted to use?
good question, because nowadays, oh my God, there are so many to choose from. So it started back when I was in college. Facebook came out, and it was only available for people in university. And so Facebook was just where we started to use social media. And then I think it was 2015, I was posting a lot about the science projects I was doing. This was before I became a polar focused scientist. I was doing a lot of field projects and just experiments in the lab, and was sharing a lot of it on Facebook. And I also was frustrated that there seemed to be a lack of stories of women working in the field sciences. It was a lot of biology is driven towards human health. And so I was like, oh, I should start a website called Woman Scientist, happened to be available. And it was also around the same time of trying to, make highlight profiles of women working in the field. And so somebody suggested, why don't you get on Instagram? And so we were just in a bar actually, and we looked up the handle for woman scientist on Instagram, and we were like, oh my God, it's available. So I started doing Instagram because I also just love photos and sharing photos. So Instagram is an awesome platform for just posting your best photos that you like. And now they have the stories feature, which took me a while to get used to. And then Facebook, you could do a business page. So I decided to have more of like a professional page, and then I'd have my personal page. And then of course with the Citizen Science Project, now I have started Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And then I also started a YouTube channel, Woman Scientist, if anybody wants to subscribe, because I was like, oh, maybe I could be one of these like video personas, and I just haven't made that really happen yet. It's a little more intimidating for me, but it's in my future. So I think I just decided what worked well. And Twitter, a lot of scientists are on Twitter, but it's a lot of word based, and it used to have very short character strands. And so I was like, I'm not going to really be involved in Twitter because I don't have the mental capacity to tweet in short statements, but I'm trying to get better at that as well. And then yeah, TikTok, I just tried that. It's super fun, but it, for me, took a lot of time to make it look really cool. So I've done a couple TikToks to play around, but I was like, I'll get into that later.
Yeah, and I mean, it is really tough, right? Because you don't want to spread yourself too thin either. Like if you start showing up everywhere, then you kind of water down your ability to do one spot really well. And I mean, to me, I haven't paid too much attention to what you do on Facebook, but to me, Instagram is definitely where you shine. Would you agree that that's where you hang out the most?
Yeah, I definitely hang out more on Instagram just because I like it better. And I can then share, yes, more than just the science stuff. I can also share my polar guide stuff and share being in the field and share being in the lab. So, you know, it can also be a diverse way to engage as well. With the stories too, you can say, well, this is what I'm doing today. I'm sitting in my bed having a live chat with Heather.
Cool. So if someone's like considering, if they've been thinking, oh, maybe I should get a little bit more serious about my social media, and they have like 2 or 3 different accounts in different places, how would you suggest they decide where they want to focus their attention? Like, how do you decide which platform is the right one for you?
I think it's really personal preference in who you like to follow, and not everybody has an account on all of the platforms. So, I mean, that kind of limits who you can interact with. If they don't have an Instagram account, then you would follow them on a Twitter account. So I think, yeah, it's personal preference completely. And you just go with what makes you the least insane feeling. So, and I know there are ways you can like cross post. So I'll do a post for one and it will cross post to a couple other ones. Or on Facebook, you can schedule posts. So I do a lot of drafting and scheduling. So I don't have to actually in the moment be constantly thinking about something. I can just spend a day drafting certain things that I find interesting, and then they'll just post automatically. Those are cool tools to use to your advantage. So
definitely. And I think you make a really good point about, you know, hanging out in places that don't make you mentally crazy. Because I always say to people, when you're thinking about getting a little bit more serious or upping your game and on one particular platform, pick the one that you like to hang out on the most. If you don't like somewhere, if you don't really like or get Twitter, or you don't really like Facebook, don't hang out there. Hang out on Instagram, or vice versa, right? Because you're never going to be able to do something well if it kind of annoys you, or you find that it's wasting your time or making you mentally bananas.
Yeah, sure. And I think too, along that lines, like if you want to take it a little more seriously, then I think the biggest thing is just whichever platform you do choose, just try to be more consistent using that. Because I know there's times where you don't have to post daily, you can, but you could also just post twice a week or once a week or once. I mean, I think you could try once a month, but you know, this is where the element of the social media part comes in. If you're only socializing once a month, I don't know, maybe it works. I like to mix it up. And yeah, if you go into the field too and I can't post anything, that's okay too.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's especially important for guides, obviously. When considering engaging in social media for professional reasons, like, you talk a lot about science stuff, and obviously there's people who aren't just guides or passengers that are following you. There are people in your industry, there are people who are, more senior than you in your industry, that kind of thing. So in that kind of, looking at that kind of situation, most guides are going to be facing that as well, right? We're going to potentially be posting stuff that people who might hire us in the future are going to be seeing. So in that case, professionally speaking, what kind of questions do viewers of this talk need to ask themselves before they go posting?
I guess, would you want, I always think of it as, would I be embarrassed, or I guess, do I feel like I'm modeling, being a good role model, because I know that potential managers are following me, but also I have some young high school or even younger children following, not children, but like teenagers following me. And so I want to just present the highlights and represent myself well in anything I'm posting. So I definitely would consider what's being put out there. And I guess, you would have to ask yourself if your grandmother or your niece would be also okay seeing this.
Yeah, for sure. What I've noticed with the stuff that you post is that you're always, you vary your content really well. So it's not just sort of like pictures of the polar regions or selfies or whatever. It's not just a lot of the same thing. There's quite a lot of variation. Do you have any, like, I don't know, advice, or like, how did you get to a place where you had a system working for you, where you could keep it really interesting and diverse?
Yeah. I have to let my dog back into my room. I'm so sorry.
Okay. When you come back, you have to tell us what your dog's name is.
Her name is Misha. She's a German Shepherd, and she's almost 14 years old and just follows me around everywhere. Actually, do you want to see it?
Hi, Misha.
There we go. A nice bed. Just lay there. Stop moving. So I know there are accounts that people, if you're a photographer and you really love photography, all of the posts are just your best photos. And then some people like to socialize through the captions they put, or share really inspiring things about how they took that photo. For me personally, I didn't want to just do science stuff, mostly because in the scientific world, there's this actual living scientist movement. Like, what is a scientist? We're real people, we're humans, we have lives going on that don't just involve us sitting in a lab with a beaker and a lab coat. And so I was trying to post a lot of the, epic scenery that I had. But I'd also post when I was in the lab, or if I was just feeling nostalgic, I'd post a penguin or something I did in my past, or how I got to where I am now. You can do stickers and ask questions through the Instagram stories. And I had asked one time, what do people want to see? Because, you can also engage with people who follow you. And everybody said something different. So I think you don't exactly know why people are following you. I have had people tell me too that they started following me because of the polar content. And so I think, I don't know if they were disappointed that they weren't always seeing polar content, but I think that's where it's like, whatever you want to do is working for you, is start with that. And I like to kind of diversify what I talk about. And sometimes it's more educational and sometimes it's more personal. So I just like, variety is the spice of life.
Yeah. And you make a really good point. Like, for people who are photographers, obviously they're going to want to highlight their photography, right? Or maybe not obviously, but a lot of people will want to use, especially a platform like Instagram, which is visual, primarily visual, to showcase their images. But again, what's cool about that platform and all the other platforms at this point, because they all have sort of multiple functionalities, is that you can still use that primary location, whether it's the Facebook business wall or the Instagram wall, for your art. And then you can use stories for the behind the scenes stuff, or the more personal stuff, or something else, like the larger context of what you're doing, right? And you and I had talked offline a little bit about how like we forget, because we're polar guides and we're surrounded by polar guides, we forget that for the average person, that is really freaking cool, you know? And we're like, oh, whatever, it's just zodiacs being lowered into the water, you know? But like back home, people are like, oh my God, is that how it happens? What? That's so cool, you know? And so just even stuff like that, like sharing, you know, you have your wall of photos as your outward facing kind of thing, but maybe your Instagram stories have like little short videos that you took of zodiacs being lowered into the water, or something that just gives us a little peek into the, in your case, life of a scientist, or in the case of maybe people watching, the life of polar guides. Like that is really interesting stuff to the average person.
Definitely. I mean, it's even, I think I had my phone on one of the ships and did a time lapse of me putting my, all the layers on, starting, I had my long johns on first, and then layered up, and then just like left the room ready to go out and to get into a zodiac. And like people loved the time lapse because it's like, oh, that's all the clothing you have to wear. But you know, in the moment I could have been like, well, yeah, you wear snow clothes. Like, isn't that, you know, basic? But I think that's totally true. The baseline shifts when we're working in this world. It's now normal to us, but it's definitely not the norm for your average person sitting at home, you know, who has a totally different job. So
Yeah,
highlighting that stuff I think is really cool. And when you're, so it doesn't even have to be some grandiose thing. It can just be something so simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I posted something ages ago that was like, I think it was just a short video of us preparing a landing site. Like, so guides wandering around, like planting flags and preparing for passengers coming. And the people who viewed it were just like,
yeah,
what? It was South Georgia, so of course it's like the most beautiful scenery ever, right? And there's nobody there but the guides, and like just little things like that that we take for granted. It makes a big difference. And on the flip side, people who only know us as guides, including our guide friends, they don't see us at home,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So like, you know, you post a lot of stuff of yourself, like going to dress up parties and things, and you know, things that are just completely different from your ship life or your science life. And that's also really cool because it lets us know the more well-rounded version of who you are. And it's fun too, because then we feel like we know you better, right?
yeah. I mean, this, the thing too is social media, you're talking to a human. So there's actually like, I think too, if you follow organizations, you tend to forget that it's human people who are behind these accounts online. And so I think sharing that human side of yourself, and that there's more to you than that. I mean, also you don't have to, you could just only show your polar guide stuff, and that's awesome too. So
Yep.
it's very, yeah, it's very.
And to that point, we do have a viewer question that I'm going to jump into in a second. But to that point, I think one of those things, going back to that initial idea of like, where do you want to decide to hang out on social media? You also need to think about like, why are you there? Who do you want to speak to, right? Like, what message do you, maybe not everybody wants to show their full, well-rounded, like, here's me at work, here's me at home, and here's pictures of your science, you know, like that's how you do it. But maybe other people are just like, no, I only want it as a space for my portfolio and like one other element of my work or whatever, right? So there's no right way to do it, right? It's more about like, how do you want to leverage it? And our discussion here is more to sort of give people ideas of, if you're not already doing these things, maybe you could, like, maybe that would be a cool way to make it more fun and interesting for you, or more fun and interesting for your followers, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's also, yeah, I guess that's the whole point, is tailor it to your liking. And yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's jump into a question. We have a question from Graham. Social media discussions or arguments, which do happen, are they worthwhile, or is it just people yelling into the abyss?
um, my personal feeling, I mean, maybe this isn't necessarily a strong trait, but I tend to be more conflict avoidant. So I just kind of avoid anything that's like a conflict like that. I think that's up to also your personal boundaries with how you want to engage with people. I mean, I think, you know, it's, the analogy would be like, you're at a party and somebody's just off in the corner yelling. You don't have to go stand by that person. You can like go walk over to this side of the room. And it's the same on your platform. As if people want to get, I do see a lot of comments, not on my own, but on other people's. And I think that's up to your own your own sanity level if you want to engage in a discussion like that, or if you just like, this isn't the place for that, because we do know some people just yell into the abyss, some people just want to vent, some people want to, hopefully there's more people being nice than there are being mean. But I think when I was younger and started on Facebook, I definitely engaged in more of the discussions that got heated. And then after a while, I was like, this is exhausting. Like, I'm just going to keep it positive.
For sure. And on the flip side, you've told me offline that you have actually made friendships via Instagram that then turned into like real life friendships and people who, you moved to their general vicinity and now you hang out in real life. So it can go both ways, right? Like social media discussions, they don't necessarily have to be like, we're not necessarily only talking about arguments or difficult followers, but also like that social element can be extremely valuable and turn into really positive, wonderful real life friendships.
Yeah, that's happened many times, which has been awesome to be following somebody and then, realizing that you're going to be in their area, or you share a common interest, or even just support each other. And so you'll start with just private messages back and forth. And then eventually it's like, oh, well, you're coming down here. Let's email and let's actually meet up and hang out. And I have a number of real life friends now who started through Instagram, which has been awesome. So that's the like positive side of social media and the good things that can come out of it, and feeling connected. I mean, especially now, the only way we really can stay connected is through our virtual worlds. And so this is the perfect time to kind of really embrace that and meet new people.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so we have another question from Lizzie. Do you actively encourage guests on board to follow you on social media, or do you just provide details more reactively if someone specifically asks? And there's a second part to this question, but I'll let you answer that one first.
I, on the ship, because I run the citizen science project Fjord Fido, I definitely advertise people follow that account, because I don't get passengers' personal information. And so it's my way that I can stay connected and give people who are interested or participated in the project updates. So I try to be very active updating how the project's going. And then through that, they might find my personal one and then follow me. Or in a conversation on the ship, we talk about it, over dinner, and I say, oh yeah, let's follow each other on social media. But I advertise my citizen science one when I'm on the ships. And then, the personal one I think would just be up to you and how you're interacting with guests and if it made sense.
Great. Okay, so then Lizzie's second question is, do your employers have any issues with you posting content that may well have their branding in it?
So this is tricky, because my first employer is the university I'm going to as a graduate student. And so they love that I post stuff about Scripps, Institution of Oceanography, because it helps with the communications department and them sharing what the Scripps scientists are up to and doing. When I'm on the ships, it's a little difficult, I think, for my situation, only because the first year of our project got funded by the National Science Foundation, I had to make sure I'm not looking like the US is promoting certain operators over others. And so I've kind of gone back and forth. Sometimes I tag people because I want to show appreciation for the operators that have participated and who I'm down there with as a scientist and a polar guide. But I tend to shy a little bit away from totally advertising, just because of that side of my professional back, being a scientist, and the US government funding for the project. But so I think that's more of a citizen science issue, like acknowledging people who participate, but not, it hasn't been an issue. Nobody from the government has come to me and said, and then the operators, I don't know. I think I haven't actually asked any operators how they feel, if they like polar guides advertising for them. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. In my experience, personally, it's only been a positive thing. If they love it, if their logo is shown, they love being tagged. It's free advertising for them, right? It's free marketing. And especially if we're doing cool stuff, we make them look good.
Yeah.
So, but I haven't asked anyone either. I've just posted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have another question from Ted. What's your goal or goals with your social media, and how well do you feel this achieves your goal or goals?
Ooh, good question.
Tough one.
My my initial goals when I started in 2015 with the social media, being more intentional about it, was to highlight, like I said, like women working out in the field. Then that has shifted away now that I'm in grad school. I've just focused on like what I'm personally doing in my grad studies and with the field stuff I am able to do and sharing Antarctica. So I'm trying to make it very educational, Antarctic focused, but also like, you know, I have a life behind my social media platform. So the goal is to educate and inspire, and kind of, yeah, show behind the scenes of how all this stuff works. And hopefully through that, people see, I think too, I like to inspire in the sense of like somebody who's following or watching could be like, oh, this is attainable. Like nothing is too much or too hard to do. Like there are ways that, you know, it just makes the daydreaming easier, so you can see yourself going down that road too. Or and then what is the other one? I think too, I'm starting to think I want to move a little more towards educational. Like you could do short little 5-minute lectures, and as a polar guide, that's a way to practice your interpretation skills or your education skills while we're all sitting at home. You could just you know, practice what you would tell people if you were on a walk and then share that as a video. So I think that would be my main goal: educate and inspire and break down show that it's doable for people.
For sure. And just to poke you a little bit, how well do you feel that what you're doing actually achieves this goal?
I haven't taken any data on this, but
Very scientific.
I think just from people's private messages that they send me, a lot of people really like express that they appreciate what I'm doing with my platform. So that's just a way that I'm like, okay, I guess people are liking this and I'll just keep it up. So I feel like I'm doing a good job. I will bring up to the numbers thing, like watching your follower numbers go up. That's just a quick way to drive you insane, because I mean, I think I don't really pay attention to that because it bounces up and down all the time. And it's not my goal isn't to get X number of people following me. Like the goal is to just connect with the people who find what I'm putting out there interesting. Yeah, that'll just drive you insane. So
for sure. Yeah. And it's interesting bringing up the idea of sort of, you know, having a focus on education and doing like little mini lectures of what you would say to someone on a walk, you know, down in Antarctica or up in the Arctic. And posting that in like an Instagram story, for example. I've always thought, you know, there's a real opportunity for guides, especially during this time where we're not actually out in the field working. That's an opportunity for you to showcase your expertise in a really simple way, right? Like your guide colleagues are watching, your people who might hire you in the future, hiring managers are probably following you on social, right? Like it's a really cool way to show like, I've got a lot of expertise in this area. I'm really enthusiastic about this. Here, I'm going to make a little video about this, you know, or I'm going to maybe, I mean, we all have tons of content on hard drives and like, you know, thumb drives. Like how many times have you passed around a thumb drive on a ship, right? We've got tons of really cool content that could be repurposed and just put out there. And then you can add your commentary onto it and like make it interesting, right? And so it's one thing to kind of just be like, okay, I'm either a guide at work and I have my reputation and the people who know me, and who hire me, and then I go home and nothing. But now we're home and there's nothing happening, and you can still share your enthusiasm, your expertise, your unique take on things, right? Like that's what is the great thing about social media. So for anyone who actually wants to do it, it's there for you to be able to do it, right?
yeah,
It just a little bit of intent.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, you know, when we're in the field and you set out your flag route and then each guide kind of has to rotate around the flags. And so you don't actually get to hear what your colleagues are telling other people. And you're like, but what knowledge are they sharing? And so it can also be used as a really cool platform to learn from each other and to like, this is a cool fact or story that I love telling people, and kind of, yeah, sharing what are we saying when we're out in Antarctica? How are people tying different elements of the environment together, or you know what Antarctica is about, or what these animals are doing. So I think that could be used for a really cool sharing moment.
Yeah, absolutely. The questions keep coming in, and I still have some questions to ask you from my question list, but I'm going to go with these viewer questions because they're great. Vicky asks, how do you let people know when you have the amazing shots of wildlife that it was done safely and avoiding disturbance? Does it need to be clear on every post in case it gets taken out of context?
That's a really good question. There was actually an awesome at the Polar Field Staff Conference, the last in-person one we had. Ayato, Haley, and Amanda did like a appropriate or not appropriate, and we all had to guess which photo was like borderline inappropriate or totally appropriate, or how close are they to this glacier, or and so I think that the takeaway from that was use your best judgment, and if you are worried somebody might interpret it, make a caption about it or just don't post it. And I think that's probably the safest way to go about it, is a judgment call that you know, if you don't want anybody to worry. And yeah, I don't know if you have something to add to that, Heather.
No, I would say the same. If it feels like it could be taken out of context, why not just add a sentence in? You know, this was taken with a such and such a zoom lens or whatever, right? Yeah, just to be on the safe side. Okay, Graham asks, how many hours a day or week do you invest in social media?
I'm kind of, maybe I should be embarrassed to say this. You know, your phone, you can check how many hours you spend. And there was one where it was like 6 hours. And I was like, that's impossible. I'm doing a bunch of other stuff, but then realized that that tracker includes your text messaging and your WhatsApp messages. And so it's not just Instagram or Twitter. So I was like, oh, thank God. Okay. Cause I definitely know.
You mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't personally feel like I spend a lot of time on it. You know, I think too, I am constantly going about the day just thinking of stuff. And so that's where I said I'll draft a post, or I'll send myself an email about a topic I was like wanting to talk about, and then I'll find a photo later in the day. So it's hard to say how much I actually spend a day. And some days there's like, I'm constantly checking it. And other days I'm like, I can't deal with this today. So I took a week off at the beginning of October, and I didn't post anything or look at email. I just went hiking and camping. And so I don't know. I don't actually know how to quantify how many hours I spend.
But it's not like it feels like a part-time job, I guess, right? It's just something that you do.
I will say it can feel like a part-time job. With the citizen science project, sometimes I had a master's student help me this winter when I was out in the field, and she made posts on my behalf, and that was amazing, because it definitely, you're always having it in your mind, and now you know somebody else is taking care of it. That's when I was like, whoa, well, this in that case was science communication. I was like, science communication, no wonder it's a whole job in itself. It's a lot of effort, and that's why people hire social media account managers. Because if you want to curate a really cool platform, it takes thought and creativity, and but
for sure. Well, this leads beautifully into a question I'd like to ask you about boundaries. Because of course, you know, whether you're posting the way that you are or just scrolling all day, you know, and not necessarily posting or engaging, it can be really all consuming, right? Social media in general. And as we've probably seen and experienced to some degree, it can have some negative impacts on mental health. A lot of guides, a lot of people that we work with, self included, we're more nature people at heart, and we don't really love the idea of getting all of our time sucked away by being on social media, or feeling like, well, because I said I'm going to post 4 times a week, now I have to do it, and you know. So what are some of the boundaries that you set, or that other people can think about setting, so that it doesn't, you know, it doesn't feel like it's taking over, and it actually feels rather like a helpful tool?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest boundary would be not to fall into the trap of the anxiety of it all. Like, if you don't want to deal with it that day or that week, that's fine. Like, no offense to anybody, but how often do you realize when you haven't heard from somebody on a post in a while? Like, yeah, sure, if it's been like a month or 2 months and you're like, where'd that person go? So I think setting the boundary of like, I'll get on when I feel like getting on, and when I feel like, if I'm having a bad mood day, I won't get on. If I'm feeling like, man, I'm kind of lonely, I'm going to socialize with people, I'll get on and see what people are up to. So I think setting that boundary for your own personal well-being is very important, and not feeling guilty when you don't post regularly. Like, it's okay. It's totally okay. And you don't have to apologize for not posting or being gone. It's okay. If you want to share that information, that's also okay. And then I would say another boundary is definitely like, I want to curate a place for positive interactions. So I try to be positive, and I try to go on other people's accounts and leave positive comments, and just like let people know, like, hey, I like your account. I like what you're doing. I'm here watching you. That sounds kind of creepy. And so I think that's another boundary, is like, I just want to use this as a space for helpful, encouraging, positive engagement with people. Do I have another boundary? Yeah, the time thing. If I personally feel like, whoa, too much time today, I'll just not.
Just shut it down.
Yeah, and you can even set timers on your phone, that so their thumb doesn't just like phantom open it. You're like, what are you
For sure. I actually use an app called the Freedom app. I think it's freedom.app, and it blocks you completely. Like, you decide. You're like, I don't want to be on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever for the next 3 hours. Like, I want to be blocked, and then the app blocks me. But the worst thing is, then I'll be doing some other work and I'm like, oh, I have to look that up on YouTube, and it's like, blocked. Oh, God, why did I do that? Yeah, but it's incredibly helpful, because then your thumb can't slip.
I've definitely thought of downloading that app, or even just telling yourself, like, for 2 hours, I'm not going to look at this phone at all. Everything will still be there when I get back. I don't know if you watched, or if anybody's watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix, or whatever the controversial take on it is. But the point I got out of it was, all of these are also just algorithms trying to like learn your patterns. And so I think that's another boundary, is to recognize this is run by an algorithm that's trying to predict what you might want to see, and to keep you on as much as possible. So I think just in general, you have control over that, unless, and if you need to block it, I mean, they're definitely, yeah, they're good at getting you to stay on the apps.
They're trying to get you addicted as much as they can. There's no question. But you referenced earlier as well that you sometimes schedule things on Facebook, for example, like you'll pre-draft everything. And you and I had spoken on another day about using apps like Later or Buffer or Hootsuite. Like, there's lots of apps that you can use if you feel, as I often feel, like I just want to sit down and schedule like 2 months of stuff just so that I'm showing up, but that I don't have to think like, oh my God, it's Friday, I haven't posted anything, And it usually takes me like, I don't know, half a day, like 4 hours to sit down and schedule like 3 posts a week for the next 8 weeks or something. Like, it's not a super huge amount of work, but then I just don't even need to think about it for 2 months, right? And that can be really helpful as well in terms of like setting boundaries for yourself, so that you don't feel beholden or like stuck or whatever, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's important too, as guides, when we go out into the field, if you're not on a ship that has good internet, you can schedule stuff and then not have to worry about it, and just be in the moment when you're out there. And yeah, it gets rid of some of that keeping you sane. Like, I don't have to be constantly thinking about it if you plan the time out in that way. So
yeah, and actually we just had a question come in from Aryan. He said, and is related to this, how do you deal with posting things on social media while you're on a ship and don't have proper internet? Do you have the feeling that you'll lose people when you don't post for a while?
I don't worry about losing people, because I know I like using these platforms anyway. And it's just, I mean, if I started my account in 2015 and we're 5 years later, like, it's, you can't really control who comes and goes. Everybody's life, we've got things going on, and so I don't really think of it like that. But I definitely have been on ships where it's like takes 48 hours to just post one photo through Instagram, and I'm like, fine, I give up, whatever, I don't care, like, I'll just do this later. And then when you come back to good connection and Wi-Fi, then you're like, hey, I'm back, everybody, and then you can like start posting again. And then it's almost fun, I think, because you're like, ooh, so and so's off in the field, I can't wait till they come back and start sharing what they were doing. And so I think that it's totally fine, and I don't really worry about that, because that's the mental sanity boundary, is they'll be there if they like your content and want to follow your page, then it's okay. Everybody can wait. Oh, I was also going to mention with the how much time do I spend? So I think too, some days I spend a lot of time crafting and like an educational post because I want to get the phrasing right, and I'm trying to practice my communication skills, and I'm trying to practice like what is important, the most important information or story I want to share right now. But that isn't just I'm spending time on social media. That in my mind is also I'm learning this concept even more. So it's me learning, it's me understanding the polar field and what's going on and what we know research wise about it. So I think that's also why it's hard to quantify the time, because I see it helping other areas of my life too, not just how much how many hours I spend crafting a message. So
that's such a good point, especially when you're talking about your area of expertise, right? Because kind of like how paring things down on Twitter is really hard, but it's actually also a really valuable exercise in brevity in being able to make a salient point without going on forever, which I have a big problem with going on forever. But it's the same thing, right? Like there's only so much that you're allowed to put in a caption for something like Instagram. So if you're trying to explain something or contextualize some science or whatever, I can see how that would be a really great exercise for you in thinking through these concepts and being able to explain them more clearly and learning to be a better science communicator, right?
Yeah. Or communicator, even because you have, you're in the field with people's attention, and maybe their attention span is like, cool, I want to move on to this next site that you have flagged, and you have, a minute or two to tell them what's cool about why you're standing there and what you want them to see. And so
yeah, for sure. Okay, so we have another question from Vicky. Do you have separate personal friends and family profiles and a professional one, or is it all the same? And if your name is your brand, can these be separated? Ooh, good question.
Ooh, that is a good question. It's definitely all blended. But I do know on some accounts you can do like close friends circles. But I'm just trying to post on Woman Scientist or Fjord Fido a more professional view, or fun view or inspiring view. And then on my personal Facebook, I realize there's a lot of people that are just following that because they probably don't know that I have the professional Facebook account. And so I just kind of maintain that same philosophy. It's like, what would I not be embarrassed about sharing about myself? Or maybe other people are like, God, why did Allison share that? I don't know.
Oh, that reminds me, you told me about the one of the posts that got the most traction that you posted. So tell us about that, because I thought that was hilarious.
So this is just to make the point that you have no idea what people actually want to hear from you. And so you should just go with what you find interesting. Because there was one day, that the breakfast food with the toast, and you cut out the circle and you put the egg in the middle. There are so many names for that. So just bored one day, I was like, I wonder what other people call this. And so I put up a story that was like, tell me what you call this. And so many people were like, what is that? I've never seen this in my life. And then, there were all these other names for it, which I just found hilarious. So I started sharing all that. And then there were a number of people who just made avocado and eggs on top of the toast. And I was like, no, it's a strategy. So I was like, I'm going to make a TikTok video on how to make eggs and toast, or it's, egg in a frame, toad in a hole. There's a lot of names. And because I also wanted to try out TikTok as a platform, and then I shared it, and I had like 35 or 40 private messages just about eggs and toast. And I was like, nobody cares when I post about Antarctica or like the penguins, or I never get this many like private messages. So I just thought it was funny, and it's just another way to engage. So yeah,
totally sort of often left field, but also interesting and fun, and just like a normal human thing, right? Like, what do you call this weird thing, egg in a toast, where you're from? Toad in a hole.
Yeah,
that's really cool. So let's talk for a second about selfies, because this is something that can be done well, and it can also be total overkill depending on what kind of Instagram influencer you fancy yourself. But what I found is that you managed to use the selfie really well in a way that sort of like humanizes your account and increases meaningful engagement with your audience. So can you talk a little bit about that, about the power of the selfie for anyone who's like, oh, I know selfies are a good thing to post, but I'm like, I don't want to,
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely can be overused. I even think recently I was like, God, I just posted 3 in a row of my own face. Like I gotta switch it up and do a scenic shot next time. But I think I personally love following the accounts where I feel like I have a sense of who the human is behind it. And so every now and then popping in if you have a photography account, like, oh, hey, I'm the photographer. Like, I just personally like that. It does bring that human social element to it. And then, yeah, but it doesn't have to all be selfies because then, I mean, we get it. That's your face. So there was also in the science field a couple of social media influencers who are science communicators actually wrote a paper, did a survey on scientists who selfie, which is a hashtag, and found that people find scientists who selfie to be more personal and engaging. And so I think too, breaking down the barrier of scientists being these abstract people, it's the same with the polar guide field. Like polar guides are superhuman, but they're also humans. So, so I think just being like, hey, this is me, is a nice human element to it.
For sure. And I found consistently with myself and with so many of the people that I work with in my coaching business that whether you like it or not, the pictures of yourself are the things that usually get the most traction. People want to see you, especially now when we actually can't meet up in person.
Yeah.
Like they really want to see you. They want to see when you're like up to something, or like, I don't know, down in San Francisco, or like in a forest or whatever. Like there's something, it's like a human connection thing, right? And so I know a lot of people who have had a lot of reservations and thought, oh, I don't want to post a whole bunch of pictures of myself. It seems ridiculous. But it's actually an advantageous thing if you are thinking of social media, as you said, as a social space, right?
Yeah.
Like it actually matters and people respond to that. So it's worth kind of thinking of, like, depending on what you're using your social media for, it's worth thinking of trying to get over yourself a little bit and just playing around with posting more photos that actually have your face in it. It doesn't have to be like a post selfie, but something where we can see your eyeballs and connect with you, right?
Yeah, I agree on that.
Cool. I'm just checking to see if there's any other questions. Lauren had made a really interesting question/comment regarding diversifying income streams. So this is kind of going in a different direction, but I think really interesting nonetheless. Some guides may not be aware that if they reach out to media distribution companies, they might be able to sell their unique, funny, or surprising polar videos and make some cash. What things would a guide need to think about before going down this path, especially with regards to like the operator that you might have been working for while getting that content?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a really good question. So like if you're out with one operator, that's how you're getting your footage. So, but you're then getting paid. I don't know. That's again, if operators have policies written in the contract that you sign about that? I haven't personally read anything about that. Except for like, don't make us look bad.
Yeah.
But I don't know actually about the income part of it. If it's, I don't know. Maybe the professional photographers who get hired would know that. Like if you're the photographer on board, they would be the ones to ask that, I think, because I don't know what the kind of rules are for the guides.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I didn't even realize you could monetize content like that, but hey, I mean, that's neat. Okay, we have maybe someone in the audience knows and they can chime in the comments and then we can share that with everybody. We have a couple more questions from Graham. Number 1, do you think you'll feel differently about social media in a later phase in life?
I don't know. I don't know what I'll feel like when I'm a year older or 5 years older. Or how even social media will evolve, because when I started, it was just Facebook, and then all of a sudden they opened Facebook up to like your mom and your dad, and now your uncle's on and everybody's following you, and then all of a sudden Facebook's just advertisements. And so I've trended away from Facebook towards Instagram. But even then I'm like, man, there's so many advertisements I'm scrolling, I want to see my friends and these people I follow who inspire me, and all I get is ad after ad. So I think that is, to answer that, it depends on how the platforms themselves evolve. And then I guess what happens in my own life. I don't know. I like socializing. I think I'm introverted, but I'm also extroverted. So for me, I don't see me not engaging on a social media platform of some sort.
Yeah. Okay. And the other question is, why bother with all the hashtags? What is the value in this?
Oh my God, hashtags are another sanity boundary. So I used to think it's all about the hashtag. That's how you'll like become an influencer. You got to get the right hashtag. Maybe in the beginning of these platforms that worked. And hashtags can definitely be a way to connect with people, or to even like swamp a movement, or like really share what's resources with people. So I kind of try to pay attention to hashtags that I see are getting traction, or so I try to not worry too much about what hashtag I'm using, because I know if I go to that hashtag, it could be like a million other people used that hashtag. So what is the point? It's kind of lost I'm not like finding anybody through that. Maybe you are. Like you can also follow hashtags. So we could have a polar guide hashtag, or I follow woman scientist hashtag and scientists who selfie hashtag. So I've met a lot of scientists through following that hashtag. But to try to figure out which ones are the ones you should use, I just stay away from that. I sometimes Google it. I'm like, best hashtag for Antarctic penguin, and then I'll see. But otherwise, I just don't really bother with hashtags. Yeah. Like to that extent. I mean, yeah.
Just use some basic ones, but not worry over much about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, cool. So I'll just throw it out to anyone watching us. If there's any last questions that you want to throw out to us, we should probably wind down. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, Allison, but Lauren says she's asked for final questions. All right, let's see if anything comes in. But in the meantime, we've covered a lot of ground. Let's kind of give a little recap for everybody. So if people listening could just take some sort of easily implementable takeaways on how they can best leverage social media for themselves as a guide, what would those takeaways be?
I would probably boil it all down to pick a platform that you like and that works for you. Make it work for you, understanding the limits of the tools themselves. Be authentically human and you, and be social, because it's social media. And then also take risks in trying new ways of engaging. If you want to make short videos, post a short video. If you want to do a story reel, do a story reel. Don't really be scared of it being perfect, because every polished, talking head that you see had to start somewhere. And so just start doing something. And then I think just remember that the polar guide world is amazing and fantastic. And so sharing any element about it is interesting content. So I think those are the takeaways. And then set your own sanity boundaries.
Great. I think those are really, really great takeaways. We do have one more question that's come up from Cecile. Do you worry about how the content you post can be used?
Like by other people screenshotting it or sharing it?
I would imagine so. Let's see if it verifies, but
the only way I've heard my content being reused is in teachers, or have said to me like, oh, I had to do a lecture today in class with the students on polar, and so I used stuff from your account. Thank you for having it up there. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. But I don't actually know how it's being used elsewhere. So I think once you put it out there, that's another reason to just be conscious of what you're presenting, because that you don't know how it will be used, unless it's like that one nightmare event where
yeah. And that makes me think of the importance of really good social media manners. So anytime that you share something from someone else, you always want to make sure that you tag them, that you give them a shout out, that kind of thing, right? Like we want to behave like really good social media citizens, because we want people to be that way with our stuff, with our content. So yeah, that's super important. So on the topic of hashtags, I know you and I had talked about hopefully getting more of our community to follow each other, right? So let's throw down the challenge, Allison. What's it going to be with hashtags?
You guys want to do hashtag Polar Guide 2020?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. And it can, yeah, share whatever you're doing in 2020 or this season. I mean, I've loved doing these webinars because of it is what the talk last week Pam said is we're connecting, socializing with each other, still feeling we're part of this community when many of us might be having a little identity crisis when sitting in our beds, not being a polar guide. But so we can at least commiserate with each other and encourage each other. And I think that sounds like a great hashtag.
Yeah, I love it. And hashtag 2020 also gives us sort of like the next 2 months or just under 2 months to actually use it. And we can check in once a week and see who's tagged themselves Polar Guide 2020. And then we can follow new people that maybe we weren't following before. And anyone who's trying to sort of up their game in this very long off season can start to play around with different things. And then those of us who just started following them can give them some feedback and say like, oh, nice stories and that kind of stuff, right? Like I'm really missing that camaraderie from the community for sure. So I would love to follow more people. So anyone who's listening, hashtag Polar Guide 2020 from now till the end of the year. Let's get together online. Let's follow each other. Let's see what we're all up to and learn from one another. I think that would be great.
Can't wait to meet people.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Meet new people. And then we're going to meet them in real life on the Pier in Ushuaia later on. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, it's hashtag, no, at something or other when we start identifying each other by our handles.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Allison. This has been amazing. And anyone who isn't already following Woman Scientist, please go and do it. She sets a great example that we can all learn from. And also, you're just really fun. Your posts are really fun and interesting, and your science stuff is very cool. So yeah, it's been wonderful. And that's it. There's no more questions. We definitely want to remind everybody that next Tuesday we have an IADO interview with the Executive Director, Gina Greer, and the Director of Ops and Government Affairs, Lisa Kelly. They will be answering all of your burning questions. So please tune in for that one, RSVP for that one when you see the post go up. And once again, on behalf of the PTGA, Allison, thank you so much for spending this hour with us and answering everyone's questions about social media.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. And thank you to everybody watching and for your questions, and for Lauren running the show and PTGA. It's been awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Take care.